In the late medieval and early modern period, the O'Connor Kerry Lordship was confined to a small area in the north of Kerry, effectively one barony, Iraticonor. Despite having limited territory, being surrounded by more powerful and greedy neighbours, the lordship nonetheless survived and even thrived for quite a while. In a way, it is illustrative of the dynamics of Gaelic lordship and highlights some of the strategies used to allow what appeared to be a very weak lordship survive in an unstable and even hostile environment. Like many aspects of history, the origins of the O'Connor Kerry sept are not the clearest. Despite the O'Connor surname, they are not descended from the same Connor as the other O'Connor septs. Rather, they seem to have originated in North Kerry and may once have held a much larger area. However, as Norman lords advance into Munster, they are pushed back into a small part of Kerry, the barony of Iraticonor, around the town of Ballylongford and the southern shore of the Shannon estuary. Here, they were caught between the Fitzmaurices of Lislaughtin, the Earl of Desmond, and various smaller lordships. All of these were theoretically vassals of the Earls of Desmond. However, as the O'Connor Kerry family would show, there was space in the game of power in the Old English Kingdom of Ireland for small lordships to preserve autonomy and balance the demands and pressures of larger lordships and indeed the crown against each other. The O'Connor Kerry sept proved quite skilled at this game. Their success was based, first of all, on skillful use of their strategic position, notably Carrigafoyle Castle. Located on the southern bank of the Shannon estuary, this allowed them to impose a toll on ships heading towards Limerick. It also provided access to seaborne supply routes along the west and northwest coast of Ireland. Military supplies and troops would flow along this route quite regularly. O'Connor Kerry had good relations with the O'Malley's, who often helped ensure that the former could obtain new gallows glasses and other supplies. A second strategy was to intermarry with their important neighbours, such as the Fitzgeralds and the Fitzmaurices. Intermarriage between Gaelic and Old English elites was quite common, highlighting that the divisions between Gaelic, Irish and Old English were often blurred and fuzzy. Identity was something very flexible in 16th century Ireland, something uncomfortable for those who liked to impose the domineering historiography of the 19th century nationalism on the past. It should also be noted that the O'Connor Kerry lordship demonstrates the profound weakness of the concept of clan in Gaelic Ireland. O'Connor Kerry was not a clan. They were a family who held power in a small lordship in Gaelic Ireland. In this, they were similar to any elite family in most of Europe. While there were ethnic, linguistic, political and cultural differences with their neighbours and rulers, as well as important legal differences in terms of land inheritance and succession, they were still an elite land-holding family seeking to strengthen their own autonomy and expand their power and wealth. They were not something archaic and unchanging. Rather, they were part of a dynamic European structure. Unfortunately, this is something that has to be repeated constantly, as far too many people seem to need Gaelic Ireland to be something archaic and see it as governed by a rigid set of unchanging laws, the so-called Brehon laws, while, in the academic sphere, there is plenty of healthy discussion of this. On the internet, it is the simplistic accounts that get the most views and appear dominant at times. As mentioned, the centre of the O'Connor Kerry lordship was Carrigafoyle Castle. Built by Conor Leah O'Connor Kerry in the late 15th century, it consisted of a large 5-storey tower, which is slightly higher than 24 metres. Its walls are over 2 metres thick. The ceilings of the second and fourth stories were vaulted, and the main entrance to the castle was on the east. It was located so that the tide could not reach it. Access to the upper floors was through a spiral staircase, which remains and is open to the public. Due to its height, it has a great view. The castle was purposely built between the high and low water marks of the Shannon. Indeed, the Shannon itself was an important part of its defence, as originally the castle formed a small island. It was fortified by two curtain walls. The inner one, which enclosed the castle, had rounded turrets, while the outer wall on the north, south and west of the castle had square corner towers. Between these curtain walls, better known as bawns, was an area used as a dock for boats. While the inner bawn no longer exists, part of the landward side of the outward wall still stands. It's 21 metres long and 2 metres thick before extending into the square turret, measuring 16 metres by 4 metres, and it's believed to have been used as a dovecote, in other words, a pigeon house. It's a cleverly built castle, taking great advantage of its location. In the 16th century, many believed that it was a very strong castle indeed. In 1573, for example, the Bishop of Cork stated that it was the strongest and most beautiful castle in the west of Munster. However, warfare was changing, and very soon the strongest of Irish castles would quickly fall to Canaan. The position of the castle allowed O'Connor Kerry to become quite rich. Referred to occasionally as the guardian of the Shannon, the castle stands watch over the Shannon estuary. Its position was used by O'Connor Kerry to extract a toll from ships heading to Limerick, something which was often the subject of complaint in Limerick. Although this toll allowed O'Connor Kerry to flourish, the lordship was in a difficult position, as it was caught between the Earl of Desmond to the west and the Fitzmaurices, known as Lord Kerry, to the east and south. O'Connor Kerry was a client of the Earl of Desmond. The latter was quite apt at keeping O'Connor Kerry and Fitzmaurice divided, for if they'd come together against Desmond, O'Connor Kerry and Fitzmaurice could well have easily dominated North Kerry. However, O'Connor Kerry still preserved great autonomy. While the Earls of Desmond may have kept Fitzmaurice and O'Connor Kerry apart, the latter at times were able to play Desmond and Fitzmaurice against each other. The main mark of the O'Connor Kerry lordship was Lislaughtin Abbey. A Franciscan house of the so-called strict Observantine rule, Lislaughtin was built by Sean O'Connor Kerry, father of the O'Connor who constructed the castle. Probably construction of the Franciscan Abbey started around 1470. However, it would only be in May 1477 that Pope Sixtus IV would grant O'Connor permission to house the Franciscan friars. Moreover, they probably only took possession the following year, since papal permission had first to go to the Prior of Ballinaskelligs, who in turn granted license to the friars to occupy the abbey, which, of course, delayed things. The abbey consists of a long building, 29 metres by 5.2 metres internally, divided into the choir and nave. Originally, there was a stone tower over the choir arch. However, this tower collapsed in the 19th century. The tower must have been impressive, as it was 4 stories high and approximately 20 metres in height. The nave has 2 doorways providing access to the interior. The western doorway was the main entrance. It's made of cut limestone in what is called the pointed style, and is 1.9 metres high by 1.4 metres wide. Over this doorway is a pointed window, originally twin-lighted by a stone mullion which no longer exists. The other door is in the south wall, also formed of limestone in the pointed style. It is 1.7 metres high by 0.8 metres wide. In the past, there would have been other buildings near the nave, but all are now gone, with the exception of a 22 metres wall. On the east of the choir, the window is divided into 4 sections, technically named lights. Externally, it is 2 metres wide, while on the inside it expands to 2.5 metres. It's around 3.7 metres high. The south wall has 3 windows. Also on the south wall is what is called a triple sedilia, stone seats which provided seating for the ministers. Apparently, these are similar to those in the nearby abbeys of Adair and Ashkeaton, so similar that they could have come from the same mason. The opposite wall of the choir has a doorway which leads to a 2-story building, 5.4 metres by 17.2 metres internally. This housed a refectory on the ground floor and a dormitory above it. The abbey is believed to have been built on the site of an earlier church dedicated to St. Locton. He was from Cork and died around 622 AD. The relic of his hand, dating to the 10th century, still exists and is held in the National Museum in Dublin. However, the abbey is best known for the famous Lislaughtin Cross, discovered in a nearby field in 1871. It was probably hidden there to prevent English soldiers from finding it. This may have happened in the Cromwellian period, though there is a chance it could have happened earlier. The cross has been called, quote, one of the most spectacular of Ireland's late medieval treasures and the finest example from Britain and Ireland, end quote. It's said to date from 1479 and was made under the patronage of Cornelius O'Connor and his wife Evelina Fitzgerald, daughter of the Knight of Glyn. This is just one of the examples of the intermarriage between the O'Connor Kerry families and families descended from Normans or other settlers. The cross is made of gilt and cast silver and contains the figure of Christ and the symbols of the evangelists at the ends of the arms of the cross. It also contains representations of Franciscan friars or St. Francis. The following inscription is inscribed on the arms of the cross. Cornelius, son of John O'Connor, headed his sept, and Evelyn, daughter of the knight, caused me to be made at the hands of William O'Connor, A.D. 1479. Intermarriage, strategic position, and the ability of various of its leaders allowed the O'Connor Kerry sept to survive and even thrive in the 14th and early 15th centuries. However, the Elizabethan period would present the lordship with great challenges. Many of these were related to the downfall of the Earl of Desmond. In 1567, Gerald Fitzgerald, Earl of Desmond, was arrested by the English. He would spend the following 5 years imprisoned, much of his time in England. His arrest would destabilise Munster. His cousin, James Fitzmaurice Fitzgerald, was left in charge of the military affairs of the earldom. In 1568, he led a large force against the Fitzmaurices of Lislaughtin. Despite having a strong force and probably outnumbering his enemy, Fitzmaurice was defeated in the Battle of Lislaughtin. Accompanying James Fitzmaurice were O'Connor Kerry and his son, Brian. Both of these were killed. The loss of Conor, leader of the sept, and his heir apparent Brian greatly weakened the power of O'Connor Kerry in the last quarter of the 16th century. After the Battle of Lislaughtin, Conor Baccock succeeded to the lordship. However, he would die 5 years later in 1573. His heir, Sean de Gottock, was a minor, allowing the Earl of Desmond to make James Fitzmaurice Fitzgerald ward of the latter. Fitzmaurice thus took possession of Carrigafoyle, increasing the power of the Earl of Desmond, both undermining O'Connor Kerry and involving the lordship in the Second Desmond Rebellion. James Fitzmaurice Fitzgerald had been made ward of the heir to the O'Connor Kerry lordship. There were also reports that he married a widow of the previous lord, though it is unsure how true these were. Nevertheless, he got possession of the castle. This would give Carrigafoyle a central role in the upcoming rebellion. Dissatisfied with the continuing imprisonment of the Earl of Desmond, as well as the land-grabbing exercises of Peter Carew, and also in defence of the Catholic religion, Fitzmaurice rebelled in 1569, beginning what was called the First Desmond Rebellion. However, this rebellion quickly fizzled out, and Fitzmaurice fled to the continent. In July 1579, Fitzmaurice returned to Ireland, landing in Smerwick Harbour with a small force of Spaniards and Italians. Although Fitzmaurice would be killed within a few months, the Second Desmond Rebellion soon engulfed a large part of western Munster. Carrigafoyle Castle was still garrisoned by Desmond's men. This meant that it would be attacked by the English. Due to its strategic location and the belief that it was a very strong castle, it offered an enticing target. A relatively large force moved against it, supported by ships. With the use of artillery, the castle fell quickly. Like the first Desmond Rebellion, the second one also ended in failure, although only after large parts of Munster had been laid waste. Following the fall of the castle in 1580, Lislaughtin Abbey was destroyed, and 3 aged friars, Fathers Donatus O'Hanrahan, Philip O'Shea, and Maurice O'Scallon, were murdered before the high altar. This was not the final conflict involving Carrigafoyle, nor was it the end of the O'Connor Kerry Lordship. The latter survived the Desmond Rebellion. However, the aftermath of the rebellion saw new political actors arrive on the scene, ones that did not act by the usual rules, and who were confident in being supported by the government, as well as being greedy for more land and power. The rise of these new planters probably contributed to O'Connor Kerry's support of Hugh O'Neill's Confederacy during the 9 Years' War. During this conflict, Carrigafoyle would switch hands a few times. After the Spanish landed in Kinsale, Sean de Gattock recaptured it following Hugh O'Donnell's arrival in Munster. He fought at Kinsale and afterwards participated in and survived O'Sullivan Bear's epic march to Munster. After the war, he'd get his castle back on being pardoned by James I. However, the early Stuarts proved as inept in relation to Ireland as Elizabeth. The O'Connor Kerry Lordship managed to survive the initial decades of the Stuarts. However, they'd be caught up in the maelstrom of the 1640s and 1650s, like the rest of Ireland. This time, the previous alliances between O'Connor Kerry and other neighbouring noble families broke down. For example, the Knight of Glyn, who like O'Connor Kerry had been on Hugh O'Neill's side in the 9 Years' War, did not support the Confederacy in the 1640s. While the O'Connor Kerry Lordship seems to have avoided most of the early conflict, in the end it would be engulfed and destroyed. In 1649 the castle was besieged and captured. The leader of the sept, Shannon of the Wine, escaped after the siege and went on the run. However, he would soon be captured and then executed in Tralee. Sacked in 1580, Lislaughtin Abbey had been reoccupied by monks in 1629. However, it too suffered in the 1640s and 1650s, being sacked by Cromwellian soldiers in 1652. This seems to have marked the end of the abbey, and indeed of the lordship. The O'Connor Kerry lords displayed considerable prowess at surviving the political game of late medieval and early modern Ireland. They were able to play other lords off against each other, as well as intermarrying with them. Theoretically subject to the Earl of Desmond, they achieved considerable autonomy and an important level of wealth, as can be witnessed in the Lislaughtin Cross. However, the advent of a series of absolute monarchs, Elizabeth, James and Charles I, all of whom were inept in relation to Ireland, fatally undermined the lordship, before it be finally swept away by the Cromwellian tsunami which swept over Ireland between 1649 and 1652. This smashed those parts of the Gaelic and Old English nobility which had survived Elizabeth and the early Stuarts.